Welcome, Gunrunner.
Widely regarded as one of the greatest video game companies of all time, Konami Industry was founded in Osaka, Japan on the 21st of March 1969. The company's founder and chairman, Kaz Kazuki, had previously run a jukebox rental and repair business before transforming it into a manufacturer of amusement machines for arcades. Konami's first coin-operated video game, Blockyard, an almost exact clone of Atari's Breakout, was released in 1977. In 1979, they began exporting products to the United States, and this was when the company started to grow exponentially, going on to release a string of hits through the early 80s like Amidar, Gyrus, Scramble, Time Pilot, Super Cobra, and Tutankhamun. This obviously led to many of their games being licensed for home release, particularly on the Atari 2600, with people like Coleco, Parker Brothers, and Philips picking up their products. And this led to the company forming a short-lived partnership with Japanese toy manufacturer Gakken to produce Konami branded video games for the Atari 2600 initially, and then other consoles after. Although the great North American video game crash brought an abrupt end to that endeavour, sadly. But in Konami's homeland, which like Europe was unaffected by the crash, two systems were about to make their debuts that would prove to be extremely profitable for the company. These were the 8-bit MSX computer and of course the Nintendo Famicom. Arriving just a few months apart towards the latter half of 1983, the MSX computer and Famicom console would dominate their respective spaces in the Japanese market, and proved to be rather successful in the West too, especially the Big N's console when it was rebranded as a Nintendo Entertainment System. As an interesting aside, and as an example of just how influential Konami were on the NES and Famicom, there is actually an unlicensed Asian Famiclone that carries Konami branding, which you can see here. Obviously this is completely unofficial, but still pretty cool nonetheless. There were also rumours at the time of a Konami branded MSX computer, but this never came to anything sadly. Konami would publish games under their own name for both the MSX and Nintendo consoles, starting off with conversions of their own arcade games like Frogger, Track and Field, Road Fighter and Ya Kung Fu, before moving on to creating new console-specific franchises like Antarctic Adventure, Castlevania, Metal Gear and the Konami Sports series. From here they would go from strength to strength, becoming one of the biggest names in the industry, not just in Japan, but across the whole world.
I've heard kids talking about Konami video games from the Nintendo Entertainment System like they were real. Come on! I mean, the action in Konami's Russian Attack is awesome. And those dudes in Castlevania are pretty intense. And I'll even admit that the sound in Konami games is jamming. But realistic? Give me a break.
Konami video games, so real, they'll blow you away.
By 1992, Konami were at their peak, with a plethora of hits behind them in both the home and the arcade. So the decision was made to move into the one market they had continued to sidestep, and that was making their own games machine for the home. They had flirted with this idea several times before, but had never made the final move, and they now decided the time was right. Konami's profile had never been higher, and their vast back catalogue would prove a big draw for consumers. Rumours gathered in the press that Konami were thinking on the idea of entering the hardware market, but then Konami both confused and surprised everyone by releasing a system aimed squarely at kids called the Picno. Released in October 1992, the Picno was a hybrid between a tablet and an educational themed video game console. The tablet type unit would connect to a normal TV set and supported up to 160 colours on screen and stereo sound. The actual technical specifications of the machine have never been confirmed, but we do know that it used a special custom chip developed by Konami themselves that combined most of its essential functions. Although several cartridges were available at release, none of them capitalised on the name recognition of existing Konami franchises, which seemed a very strange move indeed. Despite plenty of advertising, sales of the Picno were not going as strong as Konami hoped, and in 1993 the decision was made to release a slightly revised and cost-reduced Picno 2 system, dropping the price of the console from 29,800 yen to 15,800 yen. but this did little to improve sales of the console, and the arrival of the very similar Sega Picno later that year all but killed Konami's own Picno. Not only did Sega's new system offer greater functionality, it was also backed up by software featuring some iconic Sega characters like Sonic the Hedgehog, Echo the Dolphin and Alex Kidd. Konami discontinued the Picno in early 1994, with just 23 cartridges being released during its short lifetime.
お宅のテレビに絵が描ける楽しい？うんこいつは結構イケますです
コナミのグラフィックコンピュータービッグの
癖になる
コナミ
いやー大したもんですよ面白いしね簡単だしね絵もセーブできるんですよテレビに思い通りに絵が描けます
コナミのグラフィックコンピュータービッグの
あーすごい
コナミ
All the rumours of a proper Konami home console might have died down with the release of the Picno, but it seems that there was actually a lot more to this story than meets the eye. It turns out that the Picno was not the conclusion to all those rumours back in 1992, and in fact Konami had also planned something else. During the early 90s, Konami had started to engineer a new 32-bit home console based on their arcade hardware with a proposed 1993 release date. But it was only in the present day that we finally got some clarity on what Konami were actually planning. This is an excerpt from an interview with former Konami employee Masaki Kikino in John Sezipaniak's excellent book The Untold History of Japanese Game Developers about that mystery console. I was not an insider with regards to the home division, but here is what I think. Probably, technology-wise, developing hardware for a home console was no problem for Konami. But when it comes to costs, in terms of developing a console that is, technologically speaking, really capable and high capacity, and then having it make money while maintaining that high capacity, was maybe a challenge for Konami. The other possible challenge is distribution, so probably the company had to make a comprehensive analysis of business feasibility and opted out. Despite the cancellation of Konami's console, Masaki Kikino went on to have a lot of success at Konami, developing hit arcade games like Asterix, Silent Scope and the Castlevania coin-op Haunted Castle. Although this is quite revealing in terms of what Konami were doing, it doesn't give much detail on what the console was or what it could do. But in the same book there is an interview with another former Konami programmer in Yoshitaka Murayama, who also worked on the console. I joined Konami as a new graduate in 1992, in the role of programmer. In my second year after joining the department, I was put in charge of creating games for Konami's new games machine, and that's when I got involved in games design. Since it was an extremely secret project inside of Konami, there were very few people involved, so even though I was close to being a new recruit, I was expected to play a very large role. The plan at first was for Konami's games machine to be a console type, and it was suggested that it would have a card reader function to allow players to exchange data. The plan then changed midway from a console type to a portable type games machine, and it was going to have 3D polygon functionality that was not common at the time. This interview is even more revealing because it details that Konami first developed a traditional home console before moving their focus over to creating a handheld games machine instead. He went on to reveal that it would have been a lot like the Nintendo Game Boy but with a more high-class feel, and that the specs were very impressive, hence its 3D abilities, but couldn't give us anything more specific. He also said that the system was eventually cancelled when Konami made the decision to support the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation instead. But if you look a bit deeper at Konami's history in the console market, you'll find that this last snippet of information seems to miss out something very important that I spoke about quite recently in my 10 Amazing 3DO Facts video. Konami's support for that machine and even more intensive involvement in its unreleased successor, the Panasonic M2. Konami were one of the first Japanese developers to pledge their support for the 3DO M2 and got early access to the hardware, which impressed them so much that they signed a deal to license the hardware out for use in their own arcade games. Though the Panasonic M2 never made it to market, which is very much a story for another day, Konami's M2 based arcade games did. So in a roundabout way we did actually get to see what the M2 had to offer. Konami released 5 games in total across 97 and 98, and these were as follows: Tobey Polystars, Total Vice, Battle Trist, Evil Knight aka Hell Knight, Heat of 11 98 aka World Soccer Championship 1998. None of these were massively successful for the company, and shortly afterwards they decided to move all their focus into developing console games, leaving behind the arcade arena where they started and experienced much of their success. I suppose you could say that Konami did finally lift the curse and get a console out the door with the release of the PC Engine and TurboGrafx Mini in mid-2020. Indeed, it was released by Konami and contains many of their classic games, including the likes of Dracula X, Gradius 1 and 2, Salamander and Snatcher. But in reality this only came about due to the legacy of their Hudson Soft purchase, the company who created the PC Engine hardware for NEC, and the want to cash in on the mini console craze that was fueled by the release of the NES Mini, which also had some Konami games on it too. Sadly, it seems that Hudson Soft also fell victim to the Konami curse too, as they were shut down not long after the takeover was fully completed, and it seems Konami only wanted them to endlessly rinse the Bomberman franchise. A very sad ending to this story indeed. And now we live in a world where Konami have almost completely withdrawn from the console market too, preferring to focus on the mobile gaming market instead, which is an absolutely baffling decision to most of us. Just to give a bit more context to this, in an interview in 2015, Konami president Hideki Hayakawa stated that the company will pursue mobile games aggressively, and then added the following statement to expand on that soundbite a little bit more. We hope that our overseas games such as Metal Gear Solid 5 and Winning 11 continue to do well, but we are always thinking about how to push our franchises into mobile there too. With multi-platform games, there's really no point in dividing the market into categories anymore. Mobile will take on the new role of linking the general public to the gaming world. The change in strategy is clear to see, as Hideo Kojima left to form his own company, effectively signalling the death knell for the Metal Gear franchise that he created, and even Konami's once great Pro Evolution Soccer series has morphed into the awful free-to-play eFootball. So aside from the odd re-release of games from their back catalogue, like the highly playable Konami arcade classics, the company is all but finished in the console space, and is no longer considered a big player in a market they once influenced greatly. A very sad ending to this story indeed.
The Return of Dracula. Spine-chilling action on Nintendo 64 in 3D. Feel the horror. Castlevania from Konami.
And that rounds up my look at the story of Konami's console curse. Do you wish that Konami had went ahead and entered the console market themselves, or do you think they would have failed and were right to cancel their plans? As always, I love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to following patrons and YouTube backers in particular for their much appreciated pledges. Grady Haynes, Mitchell Valentino, Seth A. Robinson, Carl Olsen, Dos Gamerman, Sonic Mania 999, Paul Daniel, Andrew McKay, Retro Resolution, Matt Standish, James Taylor, Trogdor the Burninator, 8-Bit Guy, Luke MC, Mins and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to host extra content including downloads, creative insights, exclusive videos and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.